Hello, everyone. Orgina Rose here, and welcome to the show. I am so honored to have my guest today, who is an amazing being on this planet, doing really powerful work in a very specific area that is needed, especially right now. She is an educator for over 30 years in English, journalism, as well as adult learners in business. She's been a corporate trainer for 3M, Avaya Telecommunications, and others. And she is the founder of the Remergence Workshops. Please welcome Barbara Krause. Hello, Barbara.
Good morning, Orgina. It's so
Good.
wonderful to see you and to be here. Thank you.
Oh, it is truly my honor and pleasure to have you, for you are truly doing some very specific, different, unique, and powerful work in the world. So tell us a little bit about you, who you are. This breadth of work that you've done really spans quite a wide range for many years, but now you're at a very specific place. Tell us more about that work.
I would love to do that. Me die? Yup. Nobody gets off of this planet without going through death. For a lot of people, that's been a very, very scary experience. However, I challenge you to think about it, to talk about it, and possibly even to go ahead and prepare for it, because it's something that is so needed for people. And yet we're in big time denial. What I found is that if we think about how we react to death and dying, think about the stories that are behind that, because often it's been the stories that have confused us or caused us some type of way that we just can't seem to move forward. And it actually reminds me of a neighbor. And these neighbors had bats in their attic. And they tried a number of things. They did mylar balloons to the trusses. They sprayed peppermint essential oils. Nothing seemed to work. They then moved their bedroom down to the first level. I was talking to the neighbor at one point, and she said, I'm reminded of a story that my grandmother told me about one of her friends. Her friend had said that she had bats in her house, and they would fly into her hair, and she was just a mess. She was just an absolute frantic mess. And she said, I remembered that story, and it just made me more fearful. Well, I decided to do just a little bit of research because I wasn't sure about the behavior of bats. And when I researched, I found that they don't seek any kind of human contact. They want to stay away from humans. And so I think this story that the grandma told was just maybe a little far-fetched. I think maybe we need to think about it a little differently. Mm-hmm. And so the neighbors called the pest control people, and within a few hours, they had a tube attached to the outside of their house, which actually was an escape hatch, if you will, for the bats, because they were getting in, but they couldn't get out. So now the bats weren't feeling trapped, and my neighbors were feeling a lot more ease and peace of mind about the situation. Well, I say I'm kind of like that pest control representative, because I help people to shift and transform their pain, their anxiety, and their fears about death and dying, so that they can move toward a place of peace and also of, peace, but also more just comfort, and know that they are loved.
Oh, wow. Wow, you just said a mouthful. That was, first of all, an amazing story. I actually did have to deal with bats at one time in a property when I lived in Puerto Rico. There were bats that would come out. And it's true, they just would fly out every night. It was no big deal and never had any interaction. So I love that about the stories that we create around things. Did you have that kind of a story for yourself around death or dying or loss or anything like that?
Yes, when I was 5, I had my
Mhm.
first brush with death.
Mhm.
It seems like all of us remember that first time that we encountered death.
Mhm. Yeah.
And I happened to be at an outdoor service with my mom and dad for a relative who had died. And I just remember looking around and seeing everyone sobbing, and their eyes were puffy and red, and they were all wearing very dark black clothing. And of course, at 5, everybody's much taller than I am. And I just remember looking around and thinking, this is kind of scary. And then all of a sudden, I felt a stab of pain in my leg. And I thought, what is that? And it made me cry. And I looked down and there was a welt forming on my leg. Now, what I didn't know was that because of all the flowers that were around, there were bees there. And so I had been stung by a bee. But of course, everyone thought I was crying because of my relative. It took me a while to get my mother's attention, but I finally did and showed her what had happened. And it was interesting because for many years after that, I associated the pain with the bee sting. And then I put that together with the scariness, the appearance of all these people and the darkness there. And that then became how I looked at death and dying. So stories and experiences are very powerful ideas and catalysts for how we then go ahead and view our life. And in this
Yeah.
case, death.
Death. Yeah. I had a very similar story that my first, remembrance was my grandfather. And I was only around 2. So we're talking a very,
Mm,
short flash of memory here. But it was dramatic. I mean, people were absolutely bereft. I mean, just dramatic crying. I remember a relative literally being like, she was forcefully trying not to be put to the front to go to the casket. And, in
oh,
our family, we did an
yes.
open casket. And she just fought tooth and nail. She did not want to go, but she was being, forced to go. And I'm just looking at this, and it was just awful. And it's
Mm,
funny about the bug, the bee sting, because the only other thing I remember was that there was a tick in my hair because it was after we were in the car and there was something, and it was
mhm,
turns out it was a tick. And it was so it's
mhm,
just those strange things that we have. But
mhm.
I say also associated just a real resistance, a dramatic resistance to wanting to go anywhere, near a casket, to even wanting to even have to face it at all. And so I really understand that story. Yeah.
Mhm,
So I
mhm.
love how you say you're like that pest control. You helped to really release all of that kind of pain and fear. I mean, of course, there's sadness, there's natural grief, right? But you're
Yes,
talking about that resistance, that extra suffering that we experience around death, dying, and loss of others, right? Not just ourselves, but you're also talking the loss of loved ones. Yes.
absolutely. And of pets as well.
Ah, most,
So,
oh, yes.
yes,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Because love is love and loss is loss, right? It doesn't matter the recipient of that love of ours. We still love,
yes.
and that's still hard when we lose. Yeah, when there's
Mhm,
loss.
mhm.
Oh, wow. So how did you come to doing this work from, all of the education and corporate training and all of that? What caused that transfer shift for you?
Yes. Well, actually, about 10 years ago, and around 4 a.m. Now, you must wonder, how would you remember that? But at that time, I had had a number of what I call nudges from Source, the name I give to my higher power. And they had come several nights in a row. And so this particular night, well, early morning, I was awakened by one of Source's nudges. And this nudge is more of a knowing. It's hard to explain because sometimes you can also think of it as a focused attention. But what I learned was that I was to write and speak words that would heal and awaken people to loss, dying, and death. And I thought, oh, probably not me. I don't feel competent to do that. I don't feel like I'm the right person. All I do is I'm a blubbering mess when I think of death and dying. How could I comfort someone who is going through such a delicate ordeal? And so I resisted. You use the word resistance, it's perfect, because that's our first line of defense. Dig in, not me. Well, what I learned is a person should never underestimate the perseverance of Source, because the nudges kept coming stronger and more often. And finally, it took about 6 months, but I finally allowed this to work through me, because who am I to say that I'm not the one if Source feels that I am? So I started writing blogs, and I ended up writing maybe 300 to 400 word blogs a week. And this went on for the better part of a year. Now I blog once a month. But it was amazing, because Source inspired these thoughts to come through me and in me, and continues to do that to this day in all of my work. And I have to say that all I have to do is stop, close my eyes, and I feel the tingling throughout my body. And that's how I know that Source is with me. So.
Beautiful, beautiful. So you received the call.
I did.
After resistance, you said, okay, I surrender, I say yes, which is, I think, really common, right? I know that's my story. I usually would say no. And it's good it only took you about 6 months. Many times it might take me a year or two. But but beautiful. So you said, okay, here I am. Use me in the way that's highest and best. And so this became that area for you. And it seems like it then became this prolific writing happened for you, right? That's when we finally say yes, right? There's this open flow that seems to happen. So you did all of that writing of your blog. Were there other things that you wrote as well?
Mostly it was blogs. However, I did write something called Bridges, which are for the dying, because I feel the dying need to be recognized. They need to know that their life mattered, and also that they will be remembered. And a dying person is alive until his or her last breath. So I wrote Bridges, which help people make that transition, or that bridge between this world and the next. And I wrote them in honor of my mother. She geographically lived in a totally different area of the States than I lived in, so I wasn't able to visit her very often, but I could write these letters and read them to her. So that's what I did. And when I first read them to her, she asked me, okay, Barb, I get that, but where did you find them? Where'd you get the words? And I said, knowing her frame of reference, I said, God gave me the words, Mom. And so then as time went on, she was no longer able to hold the receiver, and she didn't know, I don't know if she knew who I really was, but maybe deep in her heart she might have. She would just lie there, and the in-home hospice people, nurses, would say, oh, her body language absolutely relaxed when she heard your words. And so another part that was good was you can customize these bridges. You can put the dying person's name in there, and then you can also add your name. And I would, if it's all right with you, like to read just excerpts from one of the bridges that I wrote.
Oh, please do. I would absolutely love that. Please share.
and it's entitled Absence of Fear.
Mm.
Hello, Mom. This is Barbara. You know me. I speak directly to your eternal soul. I love you, and I'm here to support you on your journey to the light, your journey home. I am absence of fear. I take your hand and put my arm around your shoulders. You feel warmth and ease. I am here for you. You look at me and we recognize each other. I am absence of fear. As you approach death, you may find that your fears lessen because your awareness is expanding. Although this journey is yours to make, the dying process seems friendlier and you do not feel alone. You are safe and deeply loved. I am all around you. Know that I am accompanying and carefully tending you. Have no doubt that all is unfolding in divine order. Rest in this knowledge. There's no one else like you. You are precious to me. Let us be together as good friends. I am absence of fear. Confidently, we turn and approach the light.
That was absolutely astounding. So beautiful, so powerful. And I can just imagine people just being so inspired to write such a letter to their loved one in that moment. That you were inspired to do that was so, so powerful. That was really, you said something in there that was very specific and special to me, as you know, and others may not, but I recently, my mother made her transition, my birth mother, and there was a whole thing about writing letters, and there was a whole thing about bringing friends. So for me, that's just a little wink, nudge. So thank you so much for sharing that, Barbara. So beautiful. I'm sure it just truly touched her heart and spoke to her heart. And that thing about relaxing the body response, I know that for sure because my godmother, who was my rock on this planet, really for the longest time, when she was in hospice, the nurses and caregivers, they all say, you need to let them know it's okay to go. You need to let them go. And
Yes.
for the longest time, I'm like, but it's not okay. I'm not ready. But then when I was, and it actually turned out to be on my birthday, I went to her bedside and it was like, okay, the gift that I want to give you on this day is just thanking her for all that she'd given me. And that I wanted her to know it's okay to go. That I would be okay. I would be well, and it's okay. And I literally saw her entire body, so much so that I thought she was actually going to go in that minute. And I was like, okay, not this moment, not on my birthday. I was like, I couldn't handle that. But her body literally responded. She wasn't, her eyes weren't open. She wasn't conscious, as we would say conscious. She wasn't sleeping, but she was in that state. And she completely responded to my words and saying, it's okay to go. And 10 days later, she did. So that to me was something so powerful to know, that all the nurses and, the caregivers knew that this is what needs to happen. This is part of what needs to happen. That says they know there's a connection, there's a feeling, and oh my goodness, through that process, I really learned that bond of love is the most powerful force on the planet. So I love that you shared that letter and shared those words, and you got the same thing. You saw that response in her body. So thank you for sharing that. That really, really was powerful. Thank you.
You're welcome. The other thing, Orgina, is you just demonstrated something that is so beautiful about the time of death and dying. And that is you figured out that this was not about you, but rather this was about her, your mother, your birth mother. And I think that idea is something that many people need to think about, because at the time, often they feel that they, the loved one themselves, I am the center of the universe. What am I going to do now when mother leaves? What am I going to do when I have to handle X, Y, and Z? But actually, that's already in divine order. And so you need to put the attention on the loved one. Like I said, making them feel like they matter, making them know how much you love them and that you'll be remembering them.
That is truly, truly powerful. And it, I believe, helps to alleviate some of the fear, the extra suffering that we actually add on to ourselves.
Yes.
Because when we're in that, what am I going to do now? We're now projecting into the future. We're borrowing worry and problems about tomorrow that isn't here yet. And instead, really being present, truly in the gift of this now moment, being present with our loved one, sharing that love, sharing the heart to heart connection that we still have while they are still here, present in whatever state that may be. That is the real gift. That's where, that to me is what can really alleviate so much of that extra pain, right? That we feel.
Yes. There is
Thinking
always
about
a sadness. There's always a sadness. There always will be.
Absolutely.
And yet, you know, and there will, for many people, continue to be a hole in their heart.
Yes.
But the memories that they have of the positive times with that person and the love they shared, that's the bond that gets them through that. So,
yeah, that is it. And then over time, you can hold on more to the love, more to that, you know, that part of you that holds the memories of them and your life together. So,
and it is natural. I mean, that's the other part. When we realize, okay, this is just another part of our life.
Right.
That's the difference. You know, it's not the end of life. And I guess it's the end of the physical body. But and that's when we'll talk about more about these reemergence workshops that you first brought up. I'll talk more about that. The idea is to just be open as you can be, and loving. It's a great time for bonding, for forgiveness, because many times through our lifetime, we have kept stuffing all these things, and without addressing them, they build up, and pretty soon we don't even know why they started. But somehow they've stuck with us, and it all comes out during the time of death and dying. So again, instead of resisting, relaxing into them, admitting to, yes, this was a problem area, and I want to forgive, you know, the loved one for whatever was the problem, and forgive myself, and then be able to move on.
Yeah, I think that really is probably the biggest source of pain and suffering when a loved one is passing. I know, you know, for my own birth mother, I was adopted, so that's why I refer to her as my birth mother. And so I spent a good part of my life with her not in it. I had moments of her in my life throughout, and I did live with her for a short time. But it wasn't that, you know, constant connection. And then there were many years of no connection. And that was due to a misunderstanding that happened, you know, many years ago, but it never got resolved. There was never any resolution because there was this letter that needed to be, you know, written that never was written. So we had all these years of being estranged. And I'm so grateful that, you know, a year almost exactly before she passed, she finally contacted me. And it was because her doctor had said, you know, get your affairs in order. She had had a number of heart attacks. She had diabetes. She was having seizures. and it wasn't looking good. So he said, get your affairs in order. And that's what she shared with me. And
Mm,
we had literally the most beautiful, loving, forgiving, honest, and open conversation we ever had. And we
mm,
were able to forgive. We were able to release all of that. And say our I love yous and how much we did love each other because we did, there
mhm.
was great love. I look exactly like her. So, I
Aw,
would see that myself in the mirror. It's like how I couldn't not love her. So she just, there was just things that couldn't be surmounted in this lifetime. But I'm so grateful that we had that call and then we
mhm,
had subsequent communication that was more frequent. And I'm so grateful for that because then I didn't have this what if, and I didn't get to say, and I should have's and would have's and could have's. Like none of that was there. I felt completely at peace
mhm,
and at
mhm.
ease when she passed, knowing we at least, ended in this lifetime in this way, completely at peace and sharing love with each other. And that to me, if there's nothing else, I believe that can alleviate so much of the suffering part. Of course, again, the pain and the grief of the loss, right? That being able to be connected in this way, but that can really alleviate a lot of it. So that would
Yeah,
be my encouragement,
yes,
just as you're saying, absolutely do that forgiveness work.
yes.
And that's
I
what you help people to do in these remergence workshops too. That's part of it, correct?
correct. Yes,
Yeah.
to actually face what you're feeling.
Mm,
Um, we hear that in so many other areas of our life. Okay, so if I'm an alcoholic, to admit, to face that I'm an alcoholic or
mm,
whatever it happens to be.
right.
But we don't think about that when it comes to dying and death. And so the idea is to face it. Yes, I am not immortal. I will have a finite time. And yet, what is it about this time that has been wonderful? How have I helped people? How have people helped me? And then to know that when your spirit leaves your body behind, it doesn't die. Your spirit doesn't die. It continues just in a different form. So that also brings a type of relief or release, if you will, to know that it goes on. Life does go on, just not in the form that you know it.
Yeah. And
So,
that is what remergence means, is it?
yes,
Yeah.
yes,
Because we've been talking about it, we've been saying the word, but it's like, okay, this is what that means. I
yes,
love it. And this is your word. You coined this phrase, too.
I did. I believe that Source worked through me for it. And it's funny because every time I wrote remergence, the spell checker on the computer would write re-emergence because that's the word you do find. And that's not this. I liken this to be how your spirit leaves your body and becomes one with source energy. That is reemergence. It's a mystery. We will never understand it. I don't think we're meant to understand it, but I think we're meant to open to it as best we can in our hearts and our minds, so that then it does alleviate a lot of additional pain and suffering.
Mhm.
We just open to it, knowing that this is natural. This is what happens for us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that in there somewhere, and it may not seem possible in the moment, but in
Mm,
there somewhere, there's actually an opportunity for a celebration.
yes.
In certain cultures, right? Down in New Orleans, they would have a whole parade. There would actually
Mm,
be a whole, parade with music celebrating, truly celebrating the life of that person and that they're now going home, that they're now home, right?
mhm,
Their soul is right. However you understand that to be, but they actually celebrate it. And there are cultures that still do. there is this beautiful celebration. I watched the movie Coco,
Yes,
that speaks
yes.
to a whole understanding about what happens after that, right? And whatever, one's beliefs are, the beauty is we do have those celebrations. We call it a memorial service or going home celebration and all of those sorts of things. I know in my family culture, Baptist and all of that, that's, there's a going home celebration and there's lots of food and, that's
Sure.
part of it. And yeah, and you laugh and you remember all of the joyful moments and it can be this incredible, beautiful time. So it is this thing of rethinking what's possible and how that time of transition can be not only for the person who is transitioning, but for those who love them. So
Yes.
that's what I love about your work is that you bring all of that to the table to
Mm.
just hold that space that people can look at doing this differently. Yeah.
Well, it's also about stories and not necessarily the negative ones like my
Right.
neighbor being so afraid of bats, but also the positive ones. And I
Yeah.
do have one about energy
Mm,
because everything is energy, and that's really when I'm saying that your spirit continues. That's what I'm talking about. Your
yes.
spirit is energy. And
Yes.
so I have a story about that, dealing with my favorite uncle.
Mm.
And I called him the Energizer Bunny because whenever he was transported because of a serious erratic heartbeat, he would be
Mm,
transported to the ER and they'd work with him and he would pull through. And this happened more times than you could count. One
mhm,
of the times I was with him along with my cousin, and I had one hand on his shoulder and I was holding his other hand with my hand.
mhm, mhm,
And I kept sending him energy of healing for his highest good, of
mhm.
love, and of forgiveness. And I kept this going and going and going. And of course, I'm watching the medical personnel prepare the paddles to shock his heart so that it
Mm,
would stabilize. I kept the energy going. And one of the people approached his bed, and all of a sudden, someone said, "Look." She must have been looking at the monitor because she said, "His heart, the rate is stabilizing. Oh my gosh." And they all cheered. And they looked at me because I was the only one who was in contact with him. It just, if I wasn't a believer before that, I was then. I was then.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. And there are so many beautiful stories of that, right? And that's part of what Reiki is all about, is that energy healing, sending that. I experienced that myself pretty dramatically. Watched someone who was turning blue
Mhm.
and, was kind of in this seemingly limbo state. And I just felt guided to, place my hands and send love over their center of their body, their stomach
Mhm.
area. And literally they just went, "Oh, thank you. That feels so much
Yes.
better."
Oh, nice. Well, my
You know?
granddaughter also was in ICU right after her birth because she kept
Mhm.
forgetting to breathe. So when you talked about the person turning blue, and I
Yeah.
remember having her up over my heart and
Mm.
just saying, "You are going to make this. You are going to be a strong little girl. I love you. We love you," and so forth. And her on the monitor, all of a sudden, everything just stabilized. And it seemed to be a turning point for her.
Yes.
So we don't realize how powerful this energy force is,
We
even
don't.
though we don't see it, we can't
Mhm.
describe it other than what we feel, but we
That's right.
can't really scientifically go in and prove it, except we
That's it.
see the results. And oh, that is such, I don't know, I can't even put the words to it, but it is more than powerful.
It
It
is.
is
It is.
something that is a huge gift to us
Yeah.
if we would
Yeah.
if we would allow it and love it. Yeah.
And there it is. That to me is the key. That again, releasing resistance, right? And allowing and opening and holding the space for. Because indeed, it's the power, all of that is in us if
Mhm.
we will allow, indeed. So that's one of the things, again, that I love about your work, is that you really help people no matter where they are and whatever their beliefs are, right?
Mhm.
Because obviously, we're speaking a certain way, but people understand it in different ways, right? It's written, the kingdom of God is in you, right? Or that which I do, you will do greater. And
Mhm.
all of these things point to the fact that we have been given so many gifts that
Yes.
many times we don't recognize and we're not aware of. But the more we can open to that and allow, the more amazing miracles we would experience, truly,
Mm.
truly.
Absolutely.
So,
Absolutely.
Barbara, tell me a bit now about how does it, how is it working with you? How is it that people can connect? What happens in your Remergence workshops and those other ways that you work with people?
Okay. Well, when you decide to work in or choose an option to work with me, um, we start in a way that you understand what's happening. In other words, I understand you have fear. You share some of your fears. We work in groups to start with. I call them dialogue circles, and
Mhm.
these are the backbones of the workshop. And
Mhm.
then knowing that everything is energy and that we look outward to see how death and dying plays out. And then we look inward in ourselves to the same thing. How is that playing out with our beliefs and our values? And then we put that all together and we have what I call the Remergence Toolkit. So we put together all of our wishes, whether they are medical, whether they are financial, and all of that goes into the same area so that we have something to give to our executor or personal representative. And
Mhm.
that's then what gives us the idea of peace of mind to
Mhm.
the extent that we allow it.
Yes.
And so it's working with your thoughts and your beliefs, knowing that they are perfectly acceptable.
Mhm.
So we start wherever you are and we move forward. And so, learning about the stories somehow that happen for you, that can relieve the pressure because they're like-minded people. Oh, they
Mhm.
thought the same way. Oh, maybe there's a different way to think. And
Mhm.
so bringing forth, I use PowerPoints and through the workshops as well, and quotes. And so just, talking to people about it, listening to each other, and
Mhm.
figuring out how can I go forward with this.
Nice.
And so that's
Nice.
the workshop piece. I do have something called confidential conversations, which are
Mhm.
one-on-ones, where we talk about the fear and pain that keeps you up at night, because
Mhm.
we all have those. And what does that mean? And then giving you my experiences and also putting you in touch with your own innate wisdom. Because I
Mhm.
really believe we know inside intuitively what we need to do. We just haven't been able to figure out how to let it show or come forth. And so
Nice.
that's
Yeah.
what I hope to do for people.
Beautiful. Well, it's what you're doing. It's what you've been doing so beautifully and so wonderfully. Again, I got to sit in on one of those workshops that you were giving, and people were just pouring out their hearts and
Mhm.
felt safe to do so. You created such a beautiful, sacred, and safe
Mhm.
space for people to just share their hearts and share their tears and just let it out and know that it's okay. It's actually perfect. And it's a beautiful thing because it shows you love, right? And that you love, or in the midst of going through those circumstances themselves, in their passing and their time of transition, able to find actual peace in the midst of that. So that's what I saw and observed, and that's why I knew I really wanted to connect and share your work and your story with as many people, especially during this time of the pandemic, because
Yes.
people are saying goodbye to lots of their loved ones. People are transitioning. There's more of it now than normal, I think. And so I think your work would be such a help for so many people. You helped me when
Mm.
I was, on the other side of my birth mother's death, and you gave some suggestions and some thoughts. And what I love too is, you will allow, spirit, source, God, however people understand, to speak, and, you get intuitive things, and you received some things for me that were just right on. They were just really right on, and helped me during that whole time and after. So I'm grateful for you and for your work. And again, I know so many people could really use the kind of support in all the ways that, whatever they're dealing with, if they have a terminal diagnosis or a health concern, or, someone else is passing or already
Mhm.
passed. It can be after, right? And needing to just kind of
Absolutely.
work through that, because that's really
Yes.
can be a challenging, that is probably the most challenging, next to actually, their
Mhm.
time of the death of a family member or for themselves. So I know, again, you're doing your emergence workshops, you have your one-on-one confidential conversations. And so how can now people take something from right here today? What kind of a tip or a
Mm.
tool can you give and share with folks that could help them right now?
All right. Well, first of all, to know that death and dying are not emergencies.
Mm.
I think that is the main point. And to know that you can move forward. I would love to be your guide to help you do that. Um, Often we just feel totally bereft. We feel like, what do I do now? And immobilized. And so, if you know that there's someone there who can gently lead you forward, and you know that it's not an emergency, you can work through this, then I think that is helpful. The other part would be to open your heart and mind to loss, death, and dying. And one of the ways that you can do that is to work with saying, okay, this is where I am now. I admit that.
Mm.
And then go forward from there,
Mm.
because we tend to have that, whatever you want to call it, stiff upper lip. We can't show our emotions. We can't do this. We can't do that. But if we just relax and say,
Mhm.
yes, this is what's happening for me, then somehow your heart is opening more, and your mind, and you can see a different way to move forward.
Mm.
And then also to work with me on some of my offerings. Now, there were two other things that I do. I'm a certified death midwife. Sometimes people call this a death doula. Um, but I'm able to work through, I'm a holistic guide. And so I work through the emotional, spiritual, and practical aspects of death and dying.
Mm. Mhm.
Sometimes I describe it as I'm a person who is like water that flows between the medical group and the funeral group.
Mm.
And I work with them. And so it's just an area that I think helps people to be more whole at that
Yeah.
time. And then
Mm.
finally, the energy healing piece. And I have used that actually during the time of dying with people and their animals, because
Mm.
they bring their animals into hospice with them, and the animals have a fantastic sense of what's happening. And so the animals will act that out. And I just put my hands on the animal and they just relax. So if you can not think of death as an emergency, but rather, all right, these things happen. They are part of the natural life cycle. I can plan for them. I call them milestones. And people say, well, why do that? Why plan now for your death in how many years? We don't know, because we don't know our expiration date.
Right.
Well, you do that so that you can be, when the time actually comes, you'll be more steady and you'll be more open and accepting.
And
And
you will
so,
help your family members as well. I think this is so
yes,
huge. Again, having just freshly, you know, dealt with all of this, having your family members who are in the midst of grieving your loss, pretty much not fully in the highest frame of mind, trying
mhm,
to make major decisions about your, your funeral, your memorial, whatever those things are,
right,
is really, really, that's challenging for your family members, for so the more you can actually decide ahead of time, you will help them when that time comes. And I just watched this very bizarre episode on Grace and Frankie, where there was a woman and she planned a big going home party. Like she decided how she wanted to go. She
uh-huh,
wanted to go the way she lived, which was,
mhm,
a big celebration and a party. And that was it. And that's how she wanted to leave the planet, and that was the way she wanted people to remember her last. And everything else she had already planned, all those final decisions. So it just, that I would say, it is one of those things you can actually make it. And you said this once. You talked about how you can actually come to that time and it can inspire you to live even more fully than you are right now. And then that time can be done in a way that you feel represents you highest and best. That it is kind of your going home, and how would you like to do that? That's what I thought was so amazing. Those were just thoughts that never occurred to me. And you presented those options. So I think that is really powerful as well, that you can be a part of that, helping to, rather than resist, actually go, all right, how would I want to do that?
right. And to
Yeah.
look at, thinking of it, it's nothing new to you right now to plan for a milestone. You had to
Yeah.
plan where you went to school. You had to plan to get your first car. You had to
Yeah.
plan your retirement. Uh,
Mhm.
so you've been planning milestones all along. And so
Mm.
this really is just another one in that succession. And when you think of it that way, and how do I want to make it easier for my loved ones when I die, then all of a sudden it's a gift all the way around, this
Yeah.
preparation.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so,
Right.
yes, yes.
Ah, beautiful, beautiful work that you are doing. Beautiful soul that you are. Thank you
Mm,
so much,
mm,
Barbara, for sharing all that you've shared today. And again, all the ways that you are helping people through a truly delicate and yet incredibly powerful, mystical, mysterious, and amazing time. So thank you.
yes.
Thank you for saying yes to your
Thank you,
call.
Regina. Yeah,
You're
for
so
being here today. I appreciate it. And I look forward to meeting people, hearing their stories,
yeah,
and just helping them to find their peace of mind.
excellent. Excellent. And we will have all of those ways to connect with Barbara right below. And I want to thank all of you for being with us today, for taking this time. If you or someone you know and love is going through this time of transition, I absolutely hope you will take Barbara up on her offerings and see how it can be done maybe a little differently without so much of the fear and suffering. Thank you. And remember, it's all about love. Bye for now.
Mm.